Before there was a Bethlehem, before a cross was ever raised, before the name of Jesus was spoken in history, one man wrote words that still refuse to fade. His name was Isaiah. He lived more than 7 centuries before Jesus Christ was born. Yet his writings describe events so specific, so aligned with the later gospel accounts, that they continue to raise a single uncomfortable question. How could Isaiah see what had not yet happened? Isaiah is often called the evangelist of the Old Testament, not because he lived in the time of the gospel, but because his words sound like they came from it. No other prophet is quoted more often by Jesus himself. No other book of prophecy reads so much like a forward-looking testimony. Isaiah speaks of a child born of a virgin at a time when biology had no such category. He describes a suffering servant who is rejected, beaten, pierced, and publicly humiliated, long before crucifixion was ever used as a form of execution. He writes of death that does not end in defeat, of life returning where silence should have remained. And this is where the problem begins, because Isaiah did not write poetry detached from history. He wrote claims that can be dated, claims that were copied, preserved, and circulated long before the 1st century. Fragments of the book of Isaiah were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, including the nearly complete Great Isaiah Scroll. These copies are centuries older than the life of Jesus, yet they contain the same passages Christians later pointed to when explaining his life, death, and resurrection. That means the text was already there, not edited afterward, not inserted later, already written, already read, already debated. This creates what many historians quietly acknowledge as an accuracy problem. Because if Isaiah was only speaking to his own time, then why do his words line up so closely with events that came hundreds of years later? And if he was not speaking beyond his time, why does the structure of his book itself seem to tell a larger story? Isaiah contains 66 chapters, the same number as the books in the Bible. The first section is heavy with warning, consequence, and moral collapse. The later chapters move toward restoration, comfort, and redemption. Judgment gives way to hope. Promise moves toward fulfillment. This transition is not abrupt. It unfolds deliberately, almost as if the book itself is walking the reader from darkness toward light. And right at the center of this movement stands the figure Isaiah calls the servant. Not a king with an army, not a conqueror, a servant who suffers quietly, who bears guilt not his own, who is described as innocent, yet treated as guilty. Isaiah writes that this servant would be led away without resistance, that he would be counted among wrongdoers, that his suffering would bring healing to others. These are not vague images. They are structured descriptions, which leads to a question that has never fully gone away. Was Isaiah recording history before it happened, or was he witnessing something beyond his own lifetime? Some have argued coincidence, others suggest layered symbolism. But even those explanations struggle with the sheer density of alignment between Isaiah's words and the later gospel narrative. Because coincidence can explain one overlap, it struggles with dozens. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why skeptics still can't explain Isaiah. In the next part, we step back into Isaiah's world, his time, his setting, his audience, to understand who this man was, what he could have known, and what he could not. Because once you understand the limits of Isaiah's world, the reach of his words becomes impossible to ignore. And that is where the mystery truly begins. The moment that changed everything did not come during peace. It came at the end of a reign. The death of King Uzziah marked more than the loss of a ruler. For decades, Judah had known stability under his leadership. Borders were secure, trade moved. The nation appeared strong from the outside. But beneath that surface, something was already breaking. After Uzziah's death, the sense of order began to slip. Leadership weakened. Power shifted hands too quickly. Fear crept into the streets of Jerusalem, not because enemies had arrived yet, but because everyone knew they were coming. Judah was surrounded by influence it could not resist and threats it could not defeat. Corruption spread quietly through courts and marketplaces. Justice became selective. Worship became divided. People spoke the language of faith while living as though it no longer mattered. The nation still claimed allegiance to God, but its daily life told a different story. To the northeast, the shadow of the Assyrian Empire grew larger each year. This was not just another rival kingdom. Assyria absorbed nations completely. Cities fell, populations were displaced, resistance was crushed without mercy. Judah knew this, everyone did, and fear does something dangerous to a people. It exposes what they trust. Some turned fully to politics. Others borrowed practices from surrounding nations. Idols appeared not only in public places, but inside homes. Faith became mixed, diluted, adjusted for survival. This was the world Isaiah lived in. Before he was known as a prophet, Isaiah was a priest. He belonged to the religious structure of Judah. He knew the rituals. He understood the law. He had been trained to serve inside the system, not challenge it. And that may be what made the decay so difficult to ignore. Isaiah watched leaders speak sacred words while making decisions that harmed the vulnerable. He saw worship continue even as moral responsibility collapsed. The outward forms remained, but the heart of the nation was drifting. There is no record of Isaiah seeking a prophetic role. No indication that he wanted to confront kings or speak against his own people. If anything, his position gave him reasons to stay quiet. But something was building. The texts suggest an inner pressure, not excitement, but awareness. A sense that the moment Judah was heading toward could not be avoided. That what was coming would require a voice, whether anyone wanted to hear it or not. Isaiah stood between two worlds, one foot in the temple, one foot in a nation on edge. He knew the language of worship. He also knew the cost of ignoring truth. And then, in a moment tied directly to the death of a king, Isaiah experienced something that ended his private struggle. What Isaiah was about to see would haunt him for the rest of his life. Because what he encountered was not just a message about Judah's future, but a vision that reshaped how he understood God, power, and responsibility. In the next part, we step inside that moment, into the experience that turned a priest into a prophet, and a witness into a messenger whose words would reach far beyond his own century. The moment did not happen in a field. It did not happen in a palace. It happened in the place Isaiah thought he understood best. The temple in Jerusalem. Isaiah entered a familiar space, but what he encountered was nothing he had ever been trained for. He saw the Lord seated on a throne, high, lifted up, authority without debate, power without explanation. The hem of God's robe filled the temple, as if even the structure itself could not contain what stood before him. Above the throne were seraphim, beings unlike anything Isaiah had language for. Each had 6 wings. With 2 they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, with 2 they moved. Even they did not look directly at what they served. And they spoke, not softly, not conversationally. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, the whole earth is full of his glory. The sound shook the foundations of the temple, the thresholds trembled, smoke filled the space, not as a symbol, but as presence. The kind that presses in on the human mind until there is nowhere to stand. This was not comfort, this was exposure. And Isaiah collapsed, not physically alone, but inwardly. His response was immediate and unfiltered. I am undone, not confused, not curious, undone. Isaiah did not list his accomplishments. He did not appeal to his priestly role. He did not defend himself. In the presence of holiness, comparison disappeared. He saw himself clearly. A man of unclean lips, he said, living among a people of unclean lips. The mouth, the very tool he would later be sent to use, was the first thing he realized could not stand on its own. Isaiah expected judgment. Instead, something else happened. One of the seraphim moved toward him, carrying a burning coal taken from the altar. It touched Isaiah's lips, not to harm him, but to cleanse him. No argument, no negotiation, no delay. Your guilt is taken away, the voice said. Your sin is atoned for. Then came the question. It was not a command. It was not directed at Isaiah alone. Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? The room waited. Isaiah did not volunteer because the task was easy. He had already seen enough to know it would not be. He had just confronted his own unworthiness and survived only by mercy. And yet he answered, Here am I, send me. This was the moment Isaiah became more than a witness. It was the moment he accepted a role that would cost him comfort, approval, and safety. Because Isaiah was not being sent to a people eager to listen. He was being sent to a nation already drifting away, a nation that would hear his words but resist their meaning. Which raises the question that lingers beneath this calling. Why would God choose a man he already knew would be rejected? In the next part, we follow Isaiah into the mission itself, into messages that were ignored, warnings that went unheeded, and a responsibility that would shape every word he ever wrote. Isaiah's calling did not come with encouragement. After the vision, after the cleansing, after the words, "Here am I, send me," the assignment itself was revealed, and it carried a weight few would willingly accept. Isaiah was told to speak, not to persuade, not to convince, but to speak knowing the message would be resisted. He was sent to a people who would hear his words but refuse to change, who would listen with their ears yet remain unmoved. The message itself would expose their condition, not correct it. Their hearts would grow harder, their understanding dimmer, their refusal clearer. Isaiah asked how long this would last. The answer offered no comfort, until cities were left empty, until houses stood abandoned, until the land itself bore the marks of loss. This was not a warning meant to prevent disaster. It was a declaration of what had already been set in motion. And Isaiah still had to say it out loud. As his words began to spread, resistance followed quickly. Some dismissed him as extreme, others treated his messages as political disruption. Leaders who relied on alliances and strategy saw him as dangerous. Religious figures who benefited from appearance over integrity saw him as a threat. Mockery came first, then distance, then hostility. Isaiah spoke against empty rituals performed without justice. He challenged leaders who claimed faith while ignoring the vulnerable. He warned against trusting foreign powers instead of God. None of this made him popular. He was not rejected because he lacked clarity. He was rejected because his message demanded accountability. And this rejection was not abstract. It played out in public spaces, in decision-making rooms, and within the religious life of the nation. Isaiah watched as his words were debated, diluted, and dismissed. Yet he did not stop. Because Isaiah's pain was not rooted in anger. It was rooted in love. He was not trying to prove himself right. He was trying to keep his people from losing everything. Every warning carried grief. Every prediction of destruction carried the hope that someone might still turn back. But the resistance grew stronger. The more clearly Isaiah spoke, the more isolated he became. His faithfulness did not lead to visible success. It led to endurance, and that endurance would stretch across decades. Isaiah would live long enough to see parts of his warnings begin to unfold. Long enough to realize that obedience does not always bring agreement, and calling does not always bring affirmation. Yet even in this rejection, something unexpected began to emerge in his message. Because alongside judgment, Isaiah started to speak of something else. Not just loss, but restoration. Not just failure, but hope. Not just destruction, but a future beyond it. In the next part, we encounter the shift that defines Isaiah's legacy. The moment when prophecy moves beyond warning and begins to speak of a figure who would carry suffering, rejection, and redemption in a way no one expected. The next moment that defined Isaiah's message did not come in a vision. It came in a political crisis. Judah was facing pressure from every direction. Enemies were forming alliances. Borders felt exposed. Fear was no longer quiet. It had reached the palace itself. At the center of this moment stood King Ahaz. Ahaz was not looking for prophecy. He was looking for survival. His plan was simple: form human alliances strong enough to protect the nation, even if it meant compromising trust in God. Strategy felt safer than faith. Isaiah was sent to confront him, not with condemnation, but with a choice. Isaiah told the king to ask for a sign, any sign, something unmistakable, something that would confirm that Judah's future did not rest in foreign agreements, but in God's presence. Ahaz refused. His refusal sounded humble, but it was calculated. He had already decided where his trust would go. And that is when Isaiah spoke words that would echo far beyond that moment. Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Not a symbol meant only for that generation. Not a political signal, a sign that would stretch across time. A virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. God with us, the room would have gone quiet. This was not how signs worked. Signs were immediate, practical, understandable. This one was none of those things. A virgin conceiving did not fit biology. A child named God with us did not fit politics, and a promise tied to a future beyond the king's lifetime did not solve Ahaz's immediate fear. Confusion followed. Some dismissed the words as symbolic language. Others treated them as poetic exaggeration. Many likely assumed Isaiah meant something closer, something ordinary, something that could be explained away. But Isaiah did not explain it, he wrote it down. He preserved the wording carefully. He did not soften it. He did not adjust it to make it reasonable. He left the claim standing exactly as it was spoken. And that is what makes this moment so unsettling, because Isaiah did not provide a method, he did not offer timing, he did not resolve the tension. Isaiah himself did not understand how this could happen, but he wrote it anyway. This was not a prophet shaping language to fit his audience. This was a messenger recording a statement that would only make sense long after he was gone. The sign was not meant to calm a king in panic. It was meant to point toward something greater than immediate rescue, toward presence, toward God stepping into human history in a way no one expected. And once that door was opened, Isaiah's words did not retreat, because the prophecy of the child was only the beginning. In the next part, Isaiah's focus sharpens. The language grows more specific, and the figure he begins to describe no longer looks like a distant symbol, but like a person whose life would carry suffering, rejection, and meaning far beyond the fate of a single nation. Isaiah does not return to politics. After speaking of judgment, after warning of loss, after delivering a sign no one knew how to process, his focus shifts again, this time with clarity that feels deliberate. He speaks of a child, not as metaphor, not as national symbolism, a child who would be born. Isaiah describes darkness first, a people weighed down by fear, a land familiar with hardship. Then, without transition, he speaks of light arriving where despair once settled. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. This is not the language of succession. Kings inherit power, they train for it, they grow into it. This child does not. The government shall be upon his shoulder, not learned later, not earned over time, placed there. Isaiah is careful with his words. He does not say the child will seek authority, he says authority will rest on him. And then come the titles. Not honorifics, not poetic exaggerations. Titles that carry meaning far beyond ceremony. Wonderful Counselor, not simply wise, but the source of wisdom itself. One whose counsel does not react to events but understands them fully. Mighty God, not protected by God, not representing God, named as God. Everlasting Father, not temporary leadership, not generational rule. Enduring presence. Prince of Peace, not peace enforced through power, but peace established through authority. No conflict can outlast. Isaiah assigns these titles without apology. He does not explain how a child could bear them. He does not redefine their meaning. He places them side by side and lets the weight remain. No human king in Judah's history fit this description. No ruler before Isaiah and none after him carried authority that extended beyond time itself. And Isaiah knew this. He lived among kings, he watched them rise and fall, he saw how fragile power really was. Yet he insists that this child would rule without end, that his authority would grow, not fade, that justice and righteousness would define his reign, not force or fear. This was not an escape from reality. It was hope grounded in something stronger than circumstance. Isaiah is not promising immediate relief. He is pointing toward a future where leadership would no longer depend on human stability, which leads to a question that refuses to resolve itself easily. How can a child carry the weight of the world? Isaiah does not answer it yet. Instead, he continues writing, continues describing a figure whose identity becomes clearer with every chapter. A figure who will not only rule, but suffer. Not only bring peace, but absorb pain. Because the child Isaiah sees is not distant from human struggle. He steps into it. And in the next part, Isaiah's words grow even more unsettling, as the promise of hope is tied directly to rejection, suffering, and a kind of sacrifice no one was expecting. Up to this point, Isaiah's words have carried a certain expectation. A child with authority, a ruler whose reign never ends. a leader bearing titles no human king could sustain. Everything points upward. And then, without warning, Isaiah turns. The figure he begins to describe no longer looks like a ruler standing above the people. He looks like someone moving among them quietly, almost unnoticed. Isaiah introduces the servant, not announced with force, not elevated by position, not carried forward by public approval. He will not shout, Isaiah writes. He will not raise his voice in the streets. This servant does not demand attention. He does not gather crowds through spectacle. He does not break the weak to prove strength. A bruised reed he will not break. A faintly burning wick he will not extinguish. Justice is still central, but it arrives without violence. Authority remains, but it is expressed through restraint. And this is where expectations begin to collapse, because this figure does not resemble a warrior. He does not confront Rome or Assyria. He does not lead rebellion or claim territory. Instead, Isaiah describes someone who advances justice through faithfulness, not force. This alone would have been difficult for many to accept, but Isaiah goes further. The servant does not only remain quiet, he suffers, not because he is defeated, not because he lacks power, but because he does not resist. Isaiah describes rejection without retaliation, pain without protest, injustice absorbed rather than returned. The servant is not crushed instantly. He endures. This is not the story Judah expected. It is not the solution kings wanted, and it is not the outcome people hoped for. Because Isaiah is now saying something dangerous, that the one who carries ultimate authority will also carry suffering, that the one meant to bring justice will be treated unjustly, that the path to peace will not pass through dominance, but through humility. This is where Isaiah's message becomes unbearable, even for him. Because a suffering servant raises questions Isaiah does not resolve easily. Why would the promised ruler accept rejection? Why would strength choose silence? Why would God's answer to corruption and violence look so vulnerable? Isaiah does not soften this tension. He lets it stand. He continues writing, knowing that the image he is describing will unsettle both the powerful and the faithful, knowing that the servant will be misunderstood long before he is recognized. And yet, Isaiah presses on. Because what comes next is even harder to accept. The servant will not only suffer, he will suffer for others. And in the next part, Isaiah's words move into territory so specific, so personal, that they will echo across centuries, forcing every reader to decide what they believe about suffering, guilt, and redemption. The words that follow do not sound like prophecy as people expect it. They sound like witnessing. Isaiah begins to describe the servant again, but now the distance is gone. The language tightens, the tone grows heavier. What he writes no longer feels symbolic, it feels observed. The servant is rejected, not misunderstood, rejected. He is pushed aside, dismissed, treated as someone people choose not to look at. Isaiah says he is familiar with grief, acquainted with sorrow, as though suffering is not something that happens to him once, but something that stays close. And still he does not speak. Isaiah writes that the servant is beaten, yet silent, accused, yet unmoving, led away without protest. Like a lamb led to the slaughter, Isaiah says, he opened not his mouth. This is not the image of a revolutionary. This is not the image of a failed leader. This is submission without weakness. Then the details sharpen. Isaiah says the servant is pierced. He says he is crushed. He says punishment falls on him, but not for his own actions. These are not metaphors, Isaiah explains. He does not clarify how someone is pierced, he does not describe the tool, he does not name the method. Because in Isaiah's world, execution did not look like this. Crucifixion did not exist in Judah's legal system. It was not a known practice. There was no cultural reference point for a man publicly pierced, lifted, and left to die slowly. And yet Isaiah writes as though he is watching it. He describes an innocent figure treated as guilty, a righteous one bearing consequences meant for others. He says the servant is assigned a grave with the wicked, yet associated with the rich in death. Details that make little sense when read casually, but refuse to disappear when examined closely. Then comes the line that changes everything. By his wounds we are healed. Isaiah does not say the servant's suffering inspires others. He does not say it teaches a lesson. He says it heals. This is substitution. This is transfer. This is someone carrying weight that does not belong to him. And it breaks something in the text. The rhythm slows. The sentences feel restrained, almost controlled, as if Isaiah is forcing himself to keep writing. He does not celebrate this vision. He records it. He watches innocents suffer and does not turn away. Isaiah does not explain how he knows this. He does not tell us why it happens this way. He simply bears witness and leaves the meaning to unfold long after his lifetime. This passage, now known as Isaiah 53, would become one of the most debated texts in history, quoted, questioned, argued over, and wrestled with for centuries, because it does not read like imagination. It reads like memory. Isaiah was watching something that wouldn't exist for another 700 years. And once he wrote it down, there was no taking it back. In the final part, we confront the question that Isaiah leaves behind. The question every reader eventually faces. If this servant truly came, and if this suffering truly happened, then what does that mean for everyone who reads these words today? Isaiah does not stop with death. After everything he has written, rejection, suffering, silence, burial, his words take a turn that should not be possible if the story ends at the grave. The servant lives. Isaiah writes that after suffering, the servant will see the result of what he endured. That his life does not simply end, but continues. That his days are prolonged. This is not poetic comfort, it is sequence. Suffering comes first, death follows, then life appears again. Isaiah does not say the servant is replaced. He does not say the mission continues through followers. He speaks of the same figure moving beyond death itself. The will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. The servant sees fruit. He sees outcome. He sees what his suffering accomplished. This is where everything Isaiah has written finally converges. The child with authority, the ruler whose reign has no end, the servant who suffers silently, the innocent one bearing guilt, the life that does not remain in death. Isaiah's language does not divide these into separate figures. He does not shift names or roles. He does not suggest multiple solutions unfolding over time. It is one man, one mission, one plan, moving steadily from promise to fulfillment. Only now does the structure become clear. The king becomes the servant suffers, the suffering leads to life, and that life extends beyond a single moment in history. Isaiah does not describe resurrection as spectacle. There are no crowds, no announcements, no reactions recorded. He simply states the outcome as fact. Life continues, purpose remains, justice is completed. And in doing so, Isaiah leaves behind something that does not fit neatly into any category of his time. He did not write a biography. He did not record an event he could verify. He did not explain how these things would happen. Isaiah wrote the message first, what later generations would call good news. Isaiah placed into words centuries earlier, without knowing names, locations, or dates. He didn't write history. He wrote the gospel before the gospel. And that is why his words still stand. Not because they are easy to accept, but because once they are read together, they refuse to be ignored. The mystery Isaiah recorded does not end with him. It begins with the reader. And the question he leaves behind is not whether he saw something extraordinary, but what it means if he did. Isaiah's life does not end with resolution. There is no moment where he sees everything come together, no scene where his warnings are finally celebrated or his faith publicly rewarded. What remains instead is something quieter and far more challenging. Isaiah becomes a blueprint. He obeys without applause. He speaks without knowing the outcome. He continues without agreement. Isaiah is not sustained by results. He is sustained by calling. He delivers messages that unsettle kings, frustrate religious leaders, and leave ordinary people confused. He is rejected not because he lacks conviction, but because he refuses to soften truth to make it acceptable. And still he writes. He records words he does not fully understand. He preserves promises he will never see fulfilled in his lifetime. He trusts that meaning does not require immediacy. That is why Isaiah still matters. Because most people want clarity before obedience. Isaiah moves forward without it. He does not demand explanation. He does not wait for affirmation. He steps into resistance with faith that what he has been given matters, even if it costs him. Isaiah shows what faith looks like, when it is stripped of reward. Faith without applause, faith without certainty, faith that holds steady when rejection becomes routine. And that raises questions that do not belong only to ancient history. What does it mean to trust God when you don't see the outcome? What does obedience look like when clarity comes later, or not at all? Isaiah's story suggests that God's work is not always loud, not always immediate. Sometimes it is written quietly, preserved carefully, and understood long after the messenger is gone. And what if God is still speaking today? Not always through visions or prophets, but through conviction, truth, and moments that press on the heart in uncomfortable ways. Isaiah reminds us that significance is not measured by response, that faithfulness is not proven by success, that obedience often precedes understanding. His words have traveled centuries without losing their weight. Not because Isaiah demanded attention, but because truth does not require it. Two more stories will appear, each connected by the same question Isaiah leaves behind. If God speaks before we are ready to hear, will we listen when the moment finally comes?